Welcome to Blonde Cards and Crafts. Let's make something together. Hello everybody, this is the Love from Lizi November card kit and this is part 1. There will be 2 videos for this 10 cards 1 kit. I'm using the 5x7 wiper die kit and this is the Made to Surprise by Sam Calcott. So I have everything out here on my desk ready to go. Let's just give you the measurements. I have 2 card bases here and they measure 10 by 5 and they're scored at 1.5 and 3, and the dies in my set cuts these out. So they're going to fold over like so, and then there'll be one at the front and one at the back, and then when you pull each side like this, your wiper mechanism will pop up. So that's the premise of this card, and like I said, you can use the dies or you don't have to. This is the mechanism part and it measures 3 by 4.5, and you can see here if you measure up by 1.5 and then across by 1.5 and score to meet those two, it'll make your little mechanism, but this was die cut out for me. I have some ephemera that came in the kit and I'm going to use them for the top of the pop-up section. So I'm going to have a little scene here that'll pop up, and I'll have a little scene on the front of my card. Speaking of the front of my card, I have 2 gold layers here. And these, hi by the way, you can just see me there in the reflection. These are going to be our mats on the front. Now they measure 6 3/4 by 4 3/4. And on top of that, I'm going to use some blue cardstock. These blue ones measure 6.5 by 4.5, and then on top of that I can put my pattern paper. Now my white piece for on the back, that measures 6 1/4 by 4 1/4, and I've also used some of the stamps that we got in the kit. I've used 2 of the stamps, the Warm Wishes, and then the smaller one is the Merry Christmas, and this is how I keep my stamps when I get them. I stick the stamp set onto a 300 GSM card and then pop that in this little wallet, and it keeps them all together. So I'm using 2 of the stamps for on the back of my card. The patterned paper that we got, it's a 6x6 patterned paper. So this one measures 6 by 4, and that's why I have done my layers for the front of the card so I could use that. The excess that I cut off that pattern paper and some other pattern paper I'll use for my side panels. Now you need 2 for the front and 2 for the back, so in total we're going to need 4 of these gold pieces, and they're 1 1/4 by 4 3/4. Then again I'm going to mat them using some navy cardstock, which is 1 by 4.5, and then I've taken some pattern paper, and these are 3/4 inch by 4 1/4, and I've used 2 different types. One type is going to be from the front, from our main pattern paper on the front, and then I've got 2 other bits that kind of match that will go on the back ones. I also have some ephemera here, and I'm going to put them on the front there. I'm going to have a little image or a scene going on, and I die cut out the Christmas wishes. With this die set we got 4 dies, and again this is how I store my dies. I have my dies on a strip of metallic piece there on top of a 300 GSM cardstock, and I die cut out each of the dies and put them on so I can see. It's kind of hard to read the dies because, you know, the letters are backwards. So anyway, I'm going to speed everything up now and we're going to assemble the card. So I'm going to put my 2 card bases together, and I'm using some art glitter glue, and I'm going to stick down the one side there to the back, and then I'll do the same to the front. I'd like to say in advance of this video, if you hear footsteps, that'll be Ghost. Ghost is one of our 2 dogs, and he likes to toddle in and out of my craft room. He sits inside. Can you hear the little toes? He likes to sit inside in the sitting room, but his big brother Buster, he likes to be in the craft room with me. And we have a little bed. We have 2 beds in the craft room for when the dogs come in to join me. But what generally happens is Buster comes into the craft room, Ghost goes into the sitting room, and every so often someone will pass by and he'll bark at them, or he'll just want to have a nose to make sure we're still here and we're all right, and he'll come into the craft room to me, and he might come over and pop his nose on my leg just to say, "You all right, Mom? I'm still here." And he might have a little walk over to Buster. So I apologize if you hear doggy sounds in the background. That's what it is. Okay, so I've stuck the wiper mechanism in, and I think the way I have done it, you can see how it's done, and it's quite, you know, you can understand how it went in. But if you're not too sure, just slow down the video and watch how I do it. I'm putting together the mats and layers for the front of our card. Once I've that done, then I'll glue down the other side of our card. Okay, so now I need to do the sides, and we'll be putting 4 of these on. So there'll be 2 to the left on the front of the card, and then there'll be 2 to the back on the right of the card. Well, it'll actually be the left once you flip it over, but you can see here what I'm doing. I'm just putting all my mats and layers together. And I'm going to do the exact same on the back side. So I'm going to edit through that so you don't have to sit and watch me doing that, but that'll be finished. There you go. I have the back done, and it's just the same as the front. Lovely. So that's our card more or less assembled. All I have to do is add some ephemera here to the back. And you can see there I'm using a little paint tray. These are the little trays that you'd put some paint for toddlers in for when they're painting, and I find it great for holding the ephemera that comes in the kit. I can separate it out, it keeps it all together, but I can see what I have to use. Okay, so there we go. We have our ephemera on the front as well as our sentiment and the back. That's it, all done. Just to add some Spectrum Noir sparkle pen for a little bit of Christmas sparkle, and I'll add some glossy accents as well. I'll put them on the trees, on the little hats on our penguins, and on the 2 deers in the background as well. So that there is card number 1. Our second card is a snow globe card, and I did think about getting a snow globe die, but decided to have a go at making this myself. So I have a piece of card, and it actually measures 12 by 6, and I've scored it at 6. So when the card is closed, you have a 6 by 6 card. I've taken one of the pattern papers that came in the kit, and this piece of pattern paper measures 5.5 by 5.5. And then I have got another piece of white card, and this is going to go in the inside. This piece also measures 5.5 by 5.5, and this will give us an area to write on rather than having to use a white pen. I'm going to inside stamp a sentiment from my stash, as well as put a little piece of the matching ephemera. I have here a die cut frame, and I have used 2 dies from my stash. One, the opening for the inside is 4 inches, and the outside of the frame is 4 5/8 inches. I have a rectangular piece of card here, and that measures 3.5 by 3/4 of an inch. Now, where I have taken the acetate that came in the kit, I have glued that down to my frame, and then around that I have put some foam tape, and I've put 2 layers of foam tape, and that'll give us room for inside, because I want to use some snow. Now you can see here my rectangular piece. I marked 1/4 of an inch from each side, and then I cut down to the outside edge, and that gave us the shaped piece for the bottom of our snow globe. I've also used one of the greetings that came in the kit. It's Season's Greetings, and I have embossed that with some silver embossing powder. I used a white gel pen to go around my frame and the little stand, and just to break up the heaviness of the navy card. So as I said, I'm going to use some of this snow. It's I'll put a link in the description for it. Rather than use sequins, I wanted it to look like a snow globe. I'm going to put some of the ephemera inside and with the snow, as well as do a little scene, like a hillside scene behind. This is the piece of card that was cut out when I cut out my smaller die, and I'm going to put that behind because I think the patterned paper on the front of the card, there's too much going on, and I just think it will give a nice definition for the snow globe. These are all the ephemera pieces, and this is how I keep them. This is like a little paint pot for when you're painting. This is also another little storage thing, and this is how I keep my ephemera and my glitter and all that kind of thing that comes in the kits so that I have easy reach. Okay, so I have a white piece of card here, and I'm just going to roughly cut out the shape of the circle, and it's only going to cover about 2/3 of it. So I'm going to cut out freehand a snowbank. I do have dies for this, but you don't need to use dies for everything. So I'm just going to use the scissors to cut that out. So I'm looking at what ephemera I want inside my snow globe, and I've decided I'm going to go with 2 deer and 2 penguins. Now my advice here, do as I say, not as I do. Don't put the penguins inside, put them on the outside. That's what I'm going to do for a finish. So I use 4 penguins, but you'll only see 2 of them. So I've stuck down my snow globe, and I'm going to stick down my little deer, and I'm going to have them facing each other on top of this little snowbank. And like I said, I'm going to attach the penguins. Don't do that. It's a waste of them, and I'm sorry actually, because I would have liked to use them on one of the other cards, but I didn't realize that at the time. So I'm leaving my mistakes in. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with that. I think that's going to look well. Now I just need to use my artificial snow. I'm using a little teaspoon in order to help me with putting the snow out, because it can be a little bit static. And for that, don't forget to use your anti-static powder on the inside of your little snow globe and around the edge of your foam tape, and do that before you take the release off the tape itself. Okay, so I'm ready to go, but I forgot to stick down my paper for the front of the card, so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to actually dump the snow back into the bag, and that's so that I can put glue on the back of my scene and stick that down onto the front of the card base. Okay, so I have that done. Now I'm going to put my fake snow back on, and then I'm going to put down the front of my snow globe. Now look, you can't see my little penguins, and I'm like, oh no, and I debated opening the whole thing back up, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to stick 2 more down on the front. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got 2 more little penguins, and I'm going to stick them exactly over the top of the ones that are inside. With that done, then I'm going to work on the little stand, and what I'm going to do is put a little piece of foam tape, and they need to be double thickness, the same as the frame of our globe. And I'm going to put them at the corners on each end of our little rectangular piece. I've used a little bit of glue to stick down the middle as well, just to make sure that that's well attached. Okay, so now I'm just going to put the white part inside, and I'm having a look, flicking the snow, and I'm liking it. It moves really well. I'm happy with that. I'm going to take some of our lovely glitter enamel dots that came in the kit, and I'm going to put 1 on either side of the season's greetings on the front. Next, I'm going to put a sentiment on the inside, and this is one from my stash. I'm using some Versafine ink, and the color that I'm using of this ink is Deep Lagoon, and I think the blues all go nicely together. Once I've that done, I've taken a little piece of ephemera, and like I said, I've used the Arctic fox with flowers in her hair, and I'm going to just pop that down at the bottom. And that's just to embellish the inside and to bring, you know, the images from the front to the inside of the card. And that is card number 2 finished. So now we're moving on to card number 3, and this is a dome card. And I have all my pieces here. I have my card base, which is a 6x6 card base, but if you're making your own, you need a piece of card measuring 12x6. And then what you do on the long side is you score it at 6, and that'll give you your card base. But there are ready-made card bases that you can buy out there. So I have this piece of card. It measures 6.5x6, and I've scored it at 1/2 and at 5.5. I've also die cut out an oval shape here, and you can use any ovals or circles or rectangles or squares that you have, but I have put a nice opening here. So you can see here I've also die cut out a frame, so I can put that around the opening to this dome area. So it just tidies it up. And the actual insert of that I'm going to put inside our card as a place to write our message. I've taken a piece of pattern paper from the kit, and I've cut this down, and it measures 6.5x6, and that's because it's going to go behind our dome opening. So you can see there what we'll do is burnish our score lines, and we'll sit that down on the front of our card base, and that's what's going to give us our dome area with our little scene in our background. And I'll just stick the frame on. Now a little bit of advice, stick the frame down, and once it's dry, then I want you to take a bone folder or a ruler and just give a little bit of curve to the front. I do it while it's still a little bit wet. It works fine, but I would recommend you do it at this point. Okay, so now I'm going to, I've just noticed I haven't trimmed down my paper there exactly right, so I'm going to trim that down to the measurements I gave you, which is 5 7/8 by 5.5. I had it at 6 by 5.5, and it just needs that little bit notched off for the top and bottom. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to stick down my little frame. And once I've that done, I thought to myself, yeah, I should have really put a bit of a curve on that. So I've that done. Next, what we want to do is take some red liner tape, and we're going to put that at the back, and that's going to be between the edge and the score line that we have there. And I'm just using the back of my bone folder to get out any air bubbles from under the release paper. And then I'll stick one side down, and once I've that done, then I'll take the release paper off the other side and stick the other side down. And I'm going to try and keep them flush with the edge of the card base. Lovely. And like I said, you can put some acetate behind that opening if you want, but I did do it for the last time I made one of these cards, but I didn't think it was necessary for this, so I've left it out. Okay, so I've picked some of the ephemera I want on the front. I'm using a little bird and 2 of the little foxes. I'm putting a little piece of foam tape on one side of the fox so that they're not curved around the front of the card. I've taken the Winter Wishes die, and I've die cut that out using some of the card that I've used for my card base. This is a little piece that I had extra, so I die cut that out. Now you can cut this out a couple of times so you have a bit of depth to the sentiment, but I felt that die cutting it out once was enough. And I've just put a little block on that so it gives it a little bit of added pressure so it adheres. I've taken the tiddles from the eyes. Did you know that's what the dot above an eye is called? It's called a tiddle. I think that is lovely. It's my second favorite word. My first favorite word is murmuration. Have you ever seen a group of starlings or birds when they're in the sky and they make these swooping and diving motions all together? Well, that's called a murmuration, and I think it's a beautiful word for a beautiful thing. So there you go, murmuration and tiddle. They're your 2 words for today. So I have taken 2 of the little bear ephemera and I have stuck them down. I've punched out a little yellow heart to match, and I put that above them. And now I'm going to take some stamps that we got in our card kit, and it's the stamp Warm Wishes that has a heart, and I've also taken the Merry Christmas, and I used these two sentiments together a lot throughout my 10 cards. I just think it's a lovely sentiment to put together. So I'm using my Versafine Onyx Black Ink to stamp them down, and you can use a stamping platform, but I find with Lizi, she uses photopolymer stamps, which is the best quality you can get, which makes this card kit so much good value. But because they're photopolymer stamps, if you use a good ink, they 99% of the time they stamp perfectly. So I have a couple of different stamping platforms, but most of the time with this kit, when I'm using Lizi's stamps, I just use a block and it works fine. But if you're any bit nervous or in doubt, use a platform. That way, if it doesn't stamp well the first time, you can always come back a second time and give it another inking up. So I'm using some of the sparkle enamel dots on the card. I'm going to put 2 in the top left hand corner. I feel it balances out the front, and then 1 beside the wishes. And that, folks, is our dome card, our 6x6 dome card. Isn't it beautiful? It's so unusual, and you can use any colors. I went with this lovely mustard card base, but you could use a white one if you wanted. But that, as I said, is card number 3. Lovely. And now we're moving on to card number 4, and this card I'm calling my Christmas bauble card. So I have a card base here, and it measures 12 by 6, and I have scored it at 6. This you can make yourself, or again buy ready-made. On top of that, I'm going to put a gold matte layer, and this gold matte measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I have my pattern paper to go on top, and I just want a sliver of the gold to show through behind it. So the pattern paper measures 5 5/8 by 5 5/8, and I want to make sure it's up in the right way, the right direction. Lovely. So that's the front of our card, not too hard. I've taken 3 pieces of ribbon. We got some lovely ribbon inside the kit, and these ribbon, they're a nice 1/2 inch width, just under 1/2 inch width card. I've also popped out 3 little images. I have this pattern paper, and I've taken my Stampin' Up punch. It's a 2 1/4 inch Stampin' Up punch, and I've punched out 3 of the little pink Christmas trees on it. And I'm going to use them as my little baubles. So this is the Stampin' Up punch, and it's the one that I've used. Look, you can see my face. Hello! And that's what I've used, but you can use dies if you have. You can use anything you like to cut out circles. So that's what I've done. Now I also wanted to make a little topper on my bauble, and to do that I took some gold card, like what we've used for our matte layer, and I've cut little strips, and those little strips are 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch. And then what I've done is I've taken 2 punches. Now the white one I have here, it has 3 different bits that you can use. So I've taken the largest bit and I punch out a hole. Then I take my next size punch up, and what I do is, it's struggling to show you, but I'm going to pop that over it and then punch again over the hole that I put the first time. And what will happen is it'll give me this little ring. Now you can get binder ring covers and you can use those, but I thought, seeing as I had these 2 punches in my stash, I would use them. And then when I put the little ring with the little piece of my gold card, it gives that little image of a bauble topper. Okay, so I've sped everything up now, and we're going to glue down our mats and our patterned paper to the front of our card. But before we stick it down to the front of the card, I want to tuck my ribbons behind my gold matte layer. Now you don't have to do this, you can just cut it off at the top of where your pattern paper is and everything, but I just think it gives a neater look. I've put some double-sided foam tape onto the back of my little circles, and I'm just arranging out my ribbons here for where I want my baubles to go. and how they're going to look. Okay, so I'm going to feed through my ribbon, being very careful of my little punched out piece. Now I do look to use the glue here, but in hindsight it was going to take a little bit too long to dry and it was a little bit fiddly. So what I've actually done is I've turned on my hot glue gun, and I'm going to use that to actually adhere down all of the ribbons to this the metal piece, the little toppers. So I'm just feeding the ribbon gently through, and then you can see there I use my glue gun. Of course I'm not inside the screen because I wasn't watching what I was doing, but I think that adheres them down nicely. But you can use whatever you like. You can use double-sided tape, liquid glue, whatever. Okay, so once I have that done and I'm happy with that, I'm just finishing off that last one. I'm then going to adhere them down, and again I'll use my liquid glue now to stick these down onto my little punched out circle. Now I brought these down a little bit too much. I think in hindsight, if I was to do it again, I would have the little strip of the gold sitting just at the top of my circle. I think it would have given a better image of the bauble, but in saying that, these still look great. I'm still really happy with it. It's just me being, you know, picky or finicky or whatever the word is. Okay, so I'm taking off the double-sided tape and I'm going to pop down my first bauble. And I'm happy with how that looks. Now I haven't pressed down the foam tape yet, just in case I want to move anything around. It's just lightly sitting down on the pattern paper. And once I'm happy with that, then I press them down. Now I'm going to use some double-sided tape to stick down my ribbon. I want to make sure that they're going to adhere down and not come off the back. And I'm going to trim these down. So although they're quite long looking there, I'll take my scissors and snip off all the little extra. Then I'm going to put some more double-sided tape over the top of them, and that'll make sure that they stay there. And because I have the double-sided tape in my hands, I just finish off doing the other three sides. I'll take the release paper off the tape, and then I'll stick that down to the front of the card. And I've just used a little bit of liquid glue around the edge and in the middle. It gives a little wiggle room, because when you use a double-sided tape and you put down, sometimes it could be hard to get that up. Ask me how I know. Okay, so that's basically our bauble card. We just need to put a sentiment on the inside and put some sequins on the outside. And I like to stick down some sequins. I've put a cluster of 3, a cluster of 2, and then 1 on its own. And when I've that done, what I like to do is take my Glossy Accents and I fill each of the sequins. I feel that helps to adhere the sequin down. And also, rather than having this empty sequin on the front, you have this nice filled clear. I just think it finishes the sequins off, but that's just me. I'm also going to use my Glossy Accents on the trees. I'm going to go over the pink markings of the trees, and I'll take my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen, and where you can see the edges of the blue trees, I'm then going to put that on there. So we have a little bit of sparkle on the card as well. But there you go, that's our Christmas bauble card. It's a simple card, but I think it's lovely and it gives a great bang for your buck. You could put a sentiment on the front of this. I didn't feel it needed it, but there was loads of dies, that lovely die sentiments that could have been used, but I'm happy with this card. Okay, so now we're on card 5, and with this I have everything out on the table that we're going to need. So I have a card base, a ready-made one. It's 12 by 6, scored at 6. And on the top of this card, as it's a top folding card, I've come in 1 inch on the left hand side and in 1 inch on the right hand side, and I've put a little mark with my pencil. I've done the same at the bottom, but I've only come in 3/4 of an inch. So I've put a pencil line joining those up. I want to do the same on my pattern paper, but I want it to come in a little bit further. So on the top, I've come in at 1 1/4 on the left and right, and at the bottom I've come in 1 inch from the bottom and the top. Now that way it's going to give us the front, because we'll cut it down. This piece of pattern paper is 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, and this piece is 4 by 4, and that'll go inside. I have an oval die, and this is 3 1/2 by 2 1/2, and my white piece is 3 by 2 for the sentiment. Okay, so we're going to cut down our card base first. No, we're going to cut down our pattern paper first, following the lines. Perfect, that's going to fit in there nicely. Now we're going to do our card base. Now you can use the scissors for this. I had the trimmer out, so I was going to use that. But I think if I was going to do this again, in hindsight, I would cut the top like that using my scissors and just go along the line. It'll give it a neater finish, I think. I had a bit of, because of the score line there, it wasn't cutting it cleanly. So hence the reason why I went in with my scissors for a finish. But that'll give us this angled panel at the front of our card. And I just thought it was something different, you know, something rather than the standard, so that's what I went with. Okay, so I'm going to glue down my pattern paper for the front of this card. I'll stick that down and try and get that nice and even between the front and the bottom. And then I've put some double-sided foam tape behind this white oval. I've stamped on it Season's Greetings using a stamp from the kit, and now I'm going to glue down our lovely blue oval that we have here. I think in hindsight I maybe should have used some more of the blue inside the card, even to just do a little strip or something, but I liked it the way it came out. But you can always do that, whatever you're using for your oval. Maybe you could matte the white piece that's going to be inside the card where you'll put your sentiment or something like that, or even just a strip of the blue might be nice. But I'm happy with this, I think it looks well. So I'm using some of the ephemera that came in the kit, 2 of the little boxes and 1 of the little flower ephemeras. I think in hindsight there as well, I used the pink little ephemera flowers, and maybe I should have gone with the blues. There are blue toned ones in the kit that came. It probably would have gone better. Okay, so I have put my piece of white card, the 4 by 4 inside, and what I've done is I have marked off the sides, because I want to make sure it's hidden completely behind the front panel. So I just used the trimmer to cut that down so I'd get a nice even cut. So I'm going to glue that down and stick that inside, and I'm going to put it behind the panel so that I can make sure that it's going to be completely hidden. So I have it behind the panel, and then I'm putting that down on the card base, and that way I know it's exactly where I want it. I paused the video at this point to answer the door and forgot to re-press record, so I don't have a finished image of putting the sequins and glossy accents etc. on the card, but I have a picture here now of this card finished. So here's some images of all 5 cards that we've made. I didn't want this video to be nearly an hour long, so I decided to cut it into 2 videos. So part 1 is the first 5 cards, and part 2 will have cards 6 to 10. And I hope that's okay with you and that you'll enjoy the 2 videos. If you liked the video, you might hit the bell and give it a thumbs up, and if you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing, and if not, you might click the subscribe button and click on the bell so you'll be notified when I make more videos. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and part 2 of this video will be in the description linked down below. Thanks for watching.